Welcome to Ammosmith.com, and today we're going to talk about the Lyman 450 Lubrisizer. What I want to do is show you how it works, so let's go ahead and get started. The Lyman 450 is pretty simple. And the way it works is you have lubricant in this hollow space in here, and there's a plunger that forces it down and into the die itself. And counterclockwise adds pressure, and clockwise takes pressure off. So what I want to do is I want to show you what the plunger looks like. And you need to take the plunger out every time you add lubricant. And the way this die, or the way this sizer is built, you need to use hollow lubricant sticks. And I've already covered how to make that in another installment of Ammosmith. Now here's the plunger itself. It has two O-rings on it. Now these things wear out, and one side of mine is already starting to wear. And all you need to do is go to the hardware store and get some neoprene or rubber gaskets to replace them. So let's go ahead and take a look inside and what we're looking at. As you look down inside the Lubrisizer, you'll see the actual lubricant itself at the bottom. And what this plunger does is it pushes it down like a grease gun would, except for with much higher pressure. As it pushes this lubricant down here around the base where the die goes, it forces it into the die. Now the dies are vented in order to allow this grease in there. Pretty easy and it's pretty straightforward. However, there's some things you should know. This plate down here is a heater, and there's a reason why I have this heater on here, and I don't use a heater anymore. But what happened was I used a really hard lubricant, and this thing just would not heat it up. And what it did was, when I tried to tighten this thing down to force the lubricant into the die, it popped the bottom right out of the sizer. It destroyed the O-ring, so I had to go get another O-ring. And then I had to fit all this thing back together, which never really fit together right. So I just bolted it together down here at the bottom with the new O-ring, and it works fine. It doesn't leak. But it's something you need to be aware of. If you have this particular Lyman 450, you're going to really want to watch out what kind of lubricants you use. The new 4500 Lubrisizer doesn't have that problem. It has a solid bottom, has a built-in heater into it. But the basic function is the same. I had this turned to the side a little bit so I can explain to you how the lubricant moves throughout the press. Right here, the lubricant is forced down, and then there's a vent that goes through here and into this portion right here. This is where the die recesses and bolts into. And what happens is that grease is forced into that die, and then when the bullet goes down and pushes the plunger in, it allows the grease to flow into the grease grooves of the bullet, thus lubricating the bullet. And also it makes it a lot easier for the bullet to go in and out of the die. If you just use a plain unlubricated die, you would have one hell of a time getting that bullet in or out. And believe me, I've had it happen. Okay. Here's a Lyman die that I ordered through Midway. It's 429 inch. It's for my 44 Magnum. Now what's nice about it is these holes go all the way down the length of the die, and that's to allow for extremely heavy bullets which are long. And the way it works is when the bullet is forced in, the actual plunger goes down, which allows for the grease to get pushed into here, and then from the pressure off the die. So when a bullet gets forced in here, to say the first groove, this is about as far down as you want this thing to go, and it'll allow this grease to flow into this grease groove, and it will also size the base band and the other two driving bands without forcing grease into the crimp groove. And when it's pushed up on the upstroke, it allows you to remove the bullet. and also seals off the die. These things are really high tolerance. So if you have a problem with the die, don't try to polish this mandrel in here, because what will happen is you'll change the value of the tolerance and you'll get leakage, which is not good. It's not terrible, but it's something you need to watch out for. Also, this O-ring right here will wear out. So go to the hardware store with one when you get your die and pick up about a half a dozen or a dozen of these and just keep them in a place where you know that you can access them, because when this thing breaks, I have a couple of dies that these are broken on, and it compromises the seal, and you'll get lubricant flowing out from underneath the nut that retains the actual die in there. So let's move on to that. Okay, some things to take note of. You don't want to lose this tool. This tool allows this retaining nut here to be removed. Another thing you might want to do too is keep a piece of empty brass that you're really not going to use anymore, and use this to remove the die itself, especially in cooler weather, because the lubricant will have a tendency to glue this die in there. The nice thing about this is lefty loosey, righty tighty, just like on just about everything else that you'll find. But the one thing you will find about this nut is it's extremely finely threaded. Get off there. This has some real fine threads, which can be a problem. This can be a real pain to get in there. So I'm going to show you how to get the die out and insert a new one. So there's a retaining nut. And the way I do it is I take the die and I start it like that. That way I can go ahead and get the threads square and get them started with the wrench. Now to get the die out. There's a little chaser on the bottom that helps push the bullet back up and through. You want to give as much space on that as possible. And the reason is you want to fit either a 9mm or a 380 case or a 40 caliber case underneath to help push this thing out. Otherwise you're going to get your fingers in there. And I've had the lever fall on my fingers, and that is not a fun experience. There, see what the case does?